Hello there, my name's Adam Forbes. I am the host of the Corporate Escapology podcast and the author of Corporate Escapology, the book. It's out on July the 2nd and available for pre-order on Amazon now. Today, my guest is Katie Elliott. She describes herself as an HR generalist. She's worked for more than 15 years in HR. And during that time, she's come to realise that she can offer her services, her experience, her knowledge to different clients and make that work around her family life. She's doing it through freelance, but also she's packaged up all of that knowledge into something she calls the HR Hub, which is a way of smaller businesses that can't necessarily afford a full-time HR person in the company to access the information that they need and keep compliant. And it made me think there are many people like Katie who are working in jobs where they know an awful lot of things and their alternative might be, I could be a consultant. But here what Katie's done is she's building something much more scalable that can work around her lifestyle, that can provide income when she's asleep, in theory. And it's something that's on offer to many people, but we don't always consider it. So let's hear Katie's story now. Thanks so much for joining me today, Katie, on the Corporate Escapology podcast. Lovely to have you here today.
Thanks so much for having me, Adam.
Oh, pleasure. Right, so I'm really interested to know what your plans were early on in your life. Did you imagine you would work for big companies? Did you imagine you would work in HR? Were you always motivated by people and wanting to help people?
Now, that is a good question because the answer is, to be very honest, no. Like a lot of people, I don't know that many people that want to work in HR. And I know that sounds kind of bad, seeing as it's basically been my whole career. But I can't lie. I do like people. I'm quite chatty. I'm quite good with people. So it was quite a natural path for me in that respect. When I did go and start working, it was something that I just kind of worked my way into. Basically, I started doing what a lot of people do, like kind of office admin jobs. And then one of those, I started sort of temping, working in a call center, and I ended up helping out the HR manager quite a lot with like recruitment and stuff. Then I went into like a more kind of a recruitment role for a small company. Yeah. And then I basically got poached by one of my clients to go and do in-house recruitment at this growing SME like engineering company, but because it was just me and the HR director there, I very, very quickly just took on absolutely everything. So I started my career in HR in recruitment, but then very quickly became what I now would describe as an HR generalist because people came to me for everything. And that's the great thing about the recruitment, is that you meet everyone coming through the door, so they know who you are. So when they've got questions, when they want to find out a bit more, they always came to me because they knew me because I'd been involved in their recruitment process. So it was a lovely kind of start. I always think of recruitment as like the happy side of HR, dare I say it, because it's all very like, come and work for us and you're great and we're great and everybody's like happy. So it is yes, shiny. So it's all, I always think of it as the happy side. Having my career kind of come through the ranks in an SME or a growing, scaling company, I think that's really good training for that because you're so used to kind of having to do a bit of everything. It's not like I went into a team where there was an HR admin, an HR assistant, an HR officer. There wasn't all these people above and below me when I went into that team. It was me and the HRD. So it was like I just had to do anything and everything that came my way pretty rapidly.
But how did you sort of get this professionalism and this I guess there's something about status and identity as well, building up so that you felt good about it too. And so qualifications may be one of those routes where you started to really build that really strong identity as an HR generalist.
Yeah, so the CIPD is the HR kind of qualification that you can get, and there are different levels of it. So effectively you can do, weirdly, they start at level 3, then it's level 5, then it's level 7.
Oh, okay.
Why? Who knows? Anyway, so I started my level 3. The HRD that I started with, she put me on that course within the first year, she was like, you're new to HR, let's get you on it. And she was like really
Right.
happy to invest. Yeah, she was very supportive of that side of it. And then about a year, maybe two later, I did the level 5, which is the sort of effectively equivalent of like a degree level. And then I have still yet to do the level 7, which is effectively like doing a master's. But I have no strong desire to do my master's in HR. I cannot lie, because as much as the theory is fantastic, the day-to-day of HR is really where you learn about HR. And it's not really, from my experience anyway, of working with SMEs, it's not doing the courses and the theory, because it's not that practical. Those kind of qualifications are not that practical of the nitty-gritty of actually like, dealing with people, dealing with really serious like grievances and processes and those kind of things that I think of as like the nitty-gritty of HR. I've learned all of that by just doing it on the job.
Yeah. And, and where do you think you sit on a sort of spectrum of quite sort of process-led HR? And that was really my experience in BP. You got so far with like a document you were given and kind of quite, people-oriented. We need both. So I'm not actually saying this one is absolutely amazing, because sometimes you just need to know, tell me what to do and I'll do that, and give me the form and whatever it needs just to kind of get you back to your job again. But where do you sort of see yourself sitting? Well, where did you see yourself then? Because I suspect it might be different a bit now as you get more and more.
So that, that's that's true. But to be honest, like the iteration of HR that we were in that company is very, very different to probably what experience you've had with HR. Like my husband's only ever worked in like kind of big corporate banks and finance companies, and he's like, God, if I want to see HR, they're like on a different floor in a locked office, like you have to book an appointment 3 weeks in advance.
Yeah, and
I
sort
worked
of
in an office
as well.
well, yes. So like, whereas I, as I said, worked in an office where there was like, I don't know, probably 100 people by the time I left. And I was in an open plan. We did have an HR office we could go into when we needed it. And yes, I was at the sort of back of the office, so no one could see my screen. But like, people would literally just kind of wander up and be like, have you got 5? So it was very much more of that kind of accessible, interactive, reactive. That was the thing that was the slight downside of it, is that it's so reactive all the time to people kind of coming up and talking to you. But, I would say what it did do was I had such great relationships with particularly the line managers, because they were the ones that would be coming and saying like, how do I deal with this? How do I deal with that? And it was more about like, I kept saying to them, I'm not going to do it for you, but I can help you like go through the process. I can help you like work out what we need to say. So that was my experience, was like being really quite hands-on with the sort of guidance side, and very, very people focused. Because as I said, just that's my experience of that company, I suppose. And I believe with a lot of SMEs that like, because you are having to sort of make it up as you go along, sometimes there aren't all these processes, so it's like either you kind of invent it or you just kind of like do the best you can with what you've got. As the company grew, like our team grew as well, I became an HR manager myself, and I had a team of people working with me, and we implemented more kind of systems and processes and stuff. So it did like change over time, and I was there like 7-8 years, so like it was quite a long stint. So I wasn't how it was at the beginning was not how it was at the end kind of thing. It did
That's
grow.
so interesting, seeing that growth though, isn't it? It's seeing that change and that professionalism, the systems, and then as you say, you rising along with that too, and you getting promoted, then you having a team of people there. How was that feeling at the time for you to move, especially with this sort of imposter syndrome? Had you knocked it on its head by then? I mean, it goes away so easily, I know. So probably.
I was like, has it gone away? Thanks, good to know. But no, so how did it? I'll be honest, like I do remember it being very busy, and very stressful at times. I also had 2 pregnancies whilst I was at that job. I didn't go back after my second because of what had become. But when I went back after my first baby, I had a team of 2 by that point, and I went down to 4 days a week. But I was effectively working 5 days for the price of 4, and it was a lot. And it was at the time, lest we forget, because my kids are now 7 and 10, that you're in the office every day. I was in central London every day. Like, you did commute. I had to get special permission to not go into the office when I had my appointments and stuff. So it was a very different world. So going back after my second, I'll be honest, it was mentally just not, I was not ready to go back after my second. I had 2 kids under 2, managing a team, as I said, on 4 days a week. The sort of the London commute, getting back out to the home counties where I live with 2 of them. And that was it. And just before I went on maternity leave, my boss had put me forward for a promotion, but my big boss, the kind of VP, had basically said, oh, well, if you want to be promoted to senior HR manager, you've got to do that level 7 that I said about. You've got to do your masters, and you've got to do more traveling, and you've got to. And I was like, okay, well, that's that decision made. I'm about to have a second baby. So I think they'd made it quite clear as well from the senior level that they were not expecting me to come back, frankly. My boss, my direct boss, was devastated, but I don't think she was surprised that I ended up.
So you just left the team.
I just left, and I was on. No, I was on SMP. I'd never got any tie-ins through maternity pay or anything like that. So I just never went back.
What a waste! I mean, just what a waste of all your knowledge. I mean, I do wonder, because things have changed so much in 10 years that, well, less maybe as well, that, whether companies now would just say that is a tremendous waste of the investment that we've made in this person that works for us.
I genuinely hope so.
2 or 3 years, she may want that again. Who knows? Or 5 or 6 years, maybe. And we don't have to take a risk on a new hire or the cost of a new hire and all the training and culture fit and everything like that.
Really exactly. So a shame, but at the time, as I said, it was right for me and it was right for my family. And then the job that I moved to was part-time in an accountancy firm that was more local, so I wasn't having to travel into London. Obviously we still go to the office because that's what we did, everybody. I know it's hard to remember, but it's what we did. They didn't even want to see me for that interview because they looked at my CV and was like, she is way too senior for this job. But I was like, absolutely, I want this job. It was school hours, it was local, it was HR. I was like, this is the job for me. I thought I'd kind of swan into some local HR job part-time. I was like, oh, that'll be so easy to find. No. Again, I hope with a lot of things that is becoming more acceptable now, that companies realise actually we could have this really great resource, but we don't have to pay a full-time salary for it. But at the time it was very hard to find something that was going to work around what I needed. So for 1 year I did 3 full days, and then when my eldest started school I moved to 4 short 9:30 to 2:30 basically. So it was so it was a nice company. They were lovely people. It was great hours, but I'd be honest, very, very early into that job, I was like, oh, I have maybe sold myself a bit short here, because it was a massive step down from what I'd been doing. And I don't think even though as I said, mentally having two children quite close together, like it was a lot, I did quite quickly realise, like, oh, this is not quite so interesting.
But did you tell me as well that you did start working for some of their clients as well? They offered you out to
so I
maybe
was
there was a bit more variety there, and also because you're then client facing rather than internal facing, different kind of challenge.
So I loved those times when I got to be involved with the other client staff. And the reason the lady who had done the job before me had left was because it got too much. She'd taken on loads of client staff, but then just as is the way, it then like totally nosedived when I took over. So it was very patchy, basically. There were times that I was really busy, really enjoying it, really felt like I was giving value. And then there were other times where, I'm not joking, I spent far too much time on the Daily Mail sidewall of shame, like just killing time. And unfortunately, the honest truth is it did really start to kind of erode my confidence in myself and my own knowledge, because like it's like anything, you know, like a language. If you don't practice, you get really rusty. So that's what I felt about my HR, that then when things did come up, and I was expected to sort of answer them really quickly and be really like snappy with my responses, I was a bit rusty, and I did make a few mistakes, and then I got kind of pulled up on it by the senior partners in the accountancy, and because obviously they were charging for me and my knowledge, and so it just kind of was getting to the point where I was like, I just don't know, like if this is working anymore. Like I really started looking for other like part-time HR jobs quite actively after about 3 years. And then March 2020 happened. And and then I still remember, because obviously I'm like a comedy genius, but I remember like leaving the office that day and being like, see you on the other side of the apocalypse, ha ha ha, and then literally not, setting foot in that office again for like 6 months was it, or whatever, the first time around. So it was absolutely bizarre. But weirdly, COVID again, suddenly everyone wanted me. Everyone wanted my input. I was sort of saying to them, like, guys, I don't have a direct line to Rishi. I don't know what's happening. But like, it was all the furlough stuff, and I was sort of putting out press releases for all the clients. And like, it was really buzzy and really like, it was just mental, wasn't it? Just in general, it felt like we were all like living in a film or something. So all in all, it sort of, it got really picked up. And, so that first kind of COVID year, I got through most of it. And then by the end of that year, basically, I just was like, it had gone, back down again. They were saying, right, come back into the office now. I was like, but I've been fine. And the kids aren't here. They're back at school now. So like, I don't want to come back in again. And so there was all this like push pull, and just eventually, at the time, my husband was self-employed, and we just had this conversation where I was like, what I was bringing in with that job was so minuscule to our like family budget that I was just like, I just don't know if it's like worth it. I kind of started thinking about becoming a consultant, basically becoming self-employed, because effectively I had been doing that for this accountancy, and I was like, well, I know that people need ad hoc HR support. Like I know that it happens, and then actually it was just, again, when I look back and I talk about all of this, I was really lucky actually with all these things. These sort of serendipitous things kind of happened. But anyway, like a friend who ran his own business contacted me, and said, we've got this issue, could you help us? And I was like, actually, yes, I can. I have got some time to help you now. So they were kind of my first client. And then I spoke to someone about branding, and I got my like company logo put together, and And I just kind of like very naively kind of just launched myself on Instagram as HR Katie, and just sort of was like, ta-da, let's see what happens.
I mean, let's just step back a second, because I do think that was a very subtle but important move, you being charged out by your accountancy firm to their clients.
Yeah.
Because I think mentally that proved to you, you just said it too, but I think it probably also built your confidence up, so you knew that you could deliver on that outside of the accountancy firm. So you got a chance to practice it too, to sort of see, okay, what are the things that I can do here that they don't need, that they really need, and what are the things that they can do themselves. You get a sort of sense about where your offer lies and where you add really good value, and where you're not necessary. And I think that's so important, because if you were doing that just from a regular HR job in a big company, you'd kind of guess what somebody wants, but you knew, because you'd gone and been working with these SMEs, and you'd started to see the offer, and you also had a sense of the value that they were getting from it, because you could see how many hours they were charging out for these things. So it was all really, I think, really good background evidence that there was a pathway for you there, and that you were the one to follow that, which I think is often one of the gaps people miss when they're sitting in a job and they're imagining what life could be like outside, and it can become a bit of a fantasy, and it can go the other way too. It can be a bit of a nightmare. You think, oh, actually I could never do that, and you just retreat. But I mean, it's just as dangerous, really, to just jump into these things without any kind of exposure or experience of those things, and you had that, which I think was just fortuitous, but also good for you for jumping into it and seeing it as that.
Yeah, I guess so. And like I said, I've always liked the kind of, I suppose, recruitment. You are meeting new people all the time. So like, again, that came relatively naturally to me, that like when I'd be sort of handed an introduction to a client that was like, right, they need some support now, I would quite quickly have to build a rapport with them, find out what was going on, like try and get to the crux of the issue. So I had realized that I was quite good at coaching effectively these line managers or business owners in these small businesses, because that was the other thing, that like very rarely did I actually have to go and sit in on those meetings. It was more that I was helping them prepare to do it themselves. Which again, I think is possibly a bit of a subtle mindset shift from being like within the corporate to then going to the sort of consulting side, because that's been a thing that has been really different for me, is that I have these calls with people and I kind of coach them through these issues and I talk them through, but like if they're just calling for like ad hoc advice, one of my power hours or something, like I don't always find out how it goes, and I'm like, oh, I wonder what happened there. Because, in my old job, obviously, I would have seen that whole process through from start to finish. And I would have been the one responsible for sort of making sure that, the manager did all the paperwork and blah, 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 blah. So, so that's been quite odd, that I've sort of had to kind of be like, right, you just get on and you just let me know how that goes. And sometimes they do come back to me and say, oh, that was fantastic, thank you very much. Like, it's all been sorted and everyone's happy. Or, actually, sometimes the reverse is true and they say they weren't happy, they resigned, but actually that was what we wanted. So it's all kind of worked, so.
But you're trading that involvement, I suppose, for more variety, more flexibility, certainly. And maybe the quality of work is a bit better as well, because you're not having to get into the admin of some of those.
I can't lie, I quite love sometimes that I'm like, keep me posted, and I don't have to be the person doing all the note taking, But to be honest, most of the people I work with, their whole thing is they don't want to get it wrong. They're conscientious, they're good people, they're running their business, they're scaling their business, they are now an employer, and they're just kind of like come to me and be like, this has happened, am I okay to do this? Or this is happening. How do I deal with it? So, sometimes I'm just a sounding board. Sometimes I'll sit with one of my clients and we just have an hour and she just kind of talks at me at like a whole bunch of stuff that's going on with her people. And we just kind of like are doing just a general kind of like debrief on, general HR plans, general business plans, like where the business is going. And then I've got another client that will use that hour to talk about very specific things related to specific people in her business. So it's just sort of how people want to kind of use my brain effectively. Because again, I suppose that's the advantage of being a generalist. I know for some people it's a real advantage when they become a consultant that they have this really, really specific skill set. But for me, as I said, I really lean into my generalism, as it were, because that's where I kind of just know I can add value in different ways because I've kind of done a lot of things. I can't say I'm like a mega expert at dealing with certain processes, but I know enough to be able to kind of help people who are just kind of on their early part of their journey as a line manager, basically.
Yeah, and most people need that sort of support, don't they? They need that sort of that kind of level, that deep. They don't need this. Most people aren't really looking for that. So you're doing some freelance stuff. So you've mentioned a few times an hour, but I think you actually do some freelance stuff for bigger chunks, don't you, for clients as well?
Yes.
And then on top of it, you're building this business, HR Hub. HR Katie is the Instagram. HR Hub is the kind of product you're building to scale your offer to be able to support more businesses more cost effectively, but also effectively for you. So tell us a bit about HR Hub or the HR Hub.
Yeah, so I came up with the idea of the HR Hub just as a way to scale, exactly, because I realised really early on that there's only one of me. I am HR Katie. I mean, that is the downside of the Ron Seal approach to a business, that like, when it is my name on the door, then there is only me. And, as I said, I'm still trying to work around the kids and school hours. And, I do have other demands in my life. And I realised that I can only scale to a certain point if I'm doing all one-to-one with clients, because obviously those hours get eaten up and then they're gone. But what I am trying to work towards is moving away from the one-to-one client work and moving more into my subscription service or my membership. I still haven't quite worked out the best terminology, but anyway, which is the HR Hub. And that is as I said, it's sort of a bit of a different approach. It's a subscription-based HR service. So you get access to me, which is the hour a month. But then you also get access to sort of HR processes, HR documents, which is all online and you can access whenever. So the idea with that being that obviously I can work with many more people in that way. And they have access to limited time with me, but they can get more if they need it, but also that they have that kind of backstop, because I think that's the thing for a lot of business owners that I was saying, that whole thing of like, do I Google it? Where do I look for this? Like the amount of time you kind of waste thinking, how do I deal with this? Because I have a little circle of self-employed friends, and I just briefly wanted to touch on that as well, like for your listeners who are maybe thinking like, should I go self-employed, or like, how would I find it? Like, I've got quite a nice balance because I have the one-to-one clients. I do go to an office. I go and see grown-ups in an office once a week, grown-ups inverted commas, once a week. And, I go and sit in an office and I go and have meetings, and, and I am an HR person, there. And then as well, as I said, I have the sort of the hub on the side, which is the much more kind of self-employed. It's the sort of the Zoom calls and the like emails and the self-promotion and the Instagram and all that sort of stuff. What I would say is that, without my one-to-one client, I totally get people who are worried about that kind of sense of isolation or lack of community of being self-employed. So I would suggest to people that they do find their tribe if they can. And there are places you can find them. But, I'm on Monday, I have a group, there's 4 of us. We get together once a month and do like a co-working session together. And it's really great to spend time with people who are also running their own business in whatever format that might be. One of my friends is a florist, the other one's a photographer, and the other one is a podcaster, and does other things. So that's my sister, yes. So we all do completely different things to each other, but we're all self-employed. We all understand the the sort of struggle of getting the bills paid, and they're like, oh, what's going on with this, and like, oh, what are you finding about that? And it's so great to have people that are kind of in the same boat as you to kind of bounce ideas off, because I think that's the camaraderie that you miss when you leave corporate life. And I totally get that people really miss that. But you can find it. That's what I would say, is that you can find it.
You can choose who you're with as well, which you can't
choose
do.
your tribe. I know, that's the best bit.
Yeah, that's right. So, but there's a few things though that you said I just think are really interesting points to sort of end on. One is that point about the one-to-one clients. That is giving you the financial security to experiment here with HR Hub as well, because you're unlikely to get it right first time. You may, but I think the odds are definitely stacked against a new business owner getting it right. You can learn and you can iterate, and you can get feedback and you can adapt, and knowing that you've got income coming in from your more stable clients. That's, I think, is a really, that's the model I've employed as well, because the uncertainty of income, I think, is enough to drag you back to a job. Just that sort of fear of, can I afford the next 3 months? Of course, it's like it's a visceral fear that would make most people, particularly people with family and and responsibilities and mortgages and everything, to just say, this is too much. I need to just get some stability, which may be the wrong choice for them for all sorts of other reasons. So there's something around that. And the second thing was what you just said about 15 years of experience there. I just think you cannot underestimate how valuable that is as a commodity for you to offer to other people. And I think when you're sitting in a job there, you don't often give yourself credit for that. You're in that job, you're thinking about what you're doing in this job. You don't necessarily recognize that value that you've accrued that is now in you. It's not really the company's anymore. They may be investing there, but they're likely to have recovered that investment that they've made in your training. That is yours to take and do with what you will. And I think it's so interesting how you have both done the freelance bit too, and that you're looking at all these different other ideas, how you can commercialize that 15 years worth of knowledge and make it work around your family. I think it's really, really, it sort of seems so obvious, but most people aren't thinking in that way. They just aren't, and they don't let themselves. And and you also touched on the imposter syndrome, but also this word generalist, which does sound a little bit sort of pejorative, but actually that generalism has given you a huge broad canvas that you can offer to lots of businesses that don't need these deep specialists. They need people like you that can help with all manner of HR things enough, and then you can probably point them to an expert if they want to get a pensions advisor in or something like that. You don't need to be the pensions advisor. I think it's such a great story. I think you should be really proud of yourself about doing this for yourself as well. You're independent now. You're a brilliant role model for your kids. It's good for the ego. You're getting your tribe built up as well of people around you. It's great. Don't you feel proud of yourself for it?
Yes, I do actually, and I love it. And I 100%. I actually got approached on LinkedIn not that long ago by really local company saying, we're looking for a part-time HR manager. Are you interested? And I was like, oh, if you'd come to me 3 years ago, I would have bitten your hand off. But I was like, I'm 3 years deep into this now, and I'm definitely not going back into paid employment. I mean, like, never say never, but for now, it is absolutely, what I want to be doing. And like I said, I think I've got a really great mix. Thank you for acknowledging it's a good mix as well. Yeah, I can't lie, I was so naive about the HR hub and about the kind of the balance with the one-to-one stuff. I thought by now I would have left one-to-one behind and I would be solely focusing on the hub, and I would be able to like have my income completely from the hub, and I would have, hundreds of people that I would be helping. That has not panned out, as you said. Like, it's all a bit of a like learning curve. So it has not panned out the way that I planned at all. But it's not to say that I am not happy. And, I've got a really nice balance. I've got a really nice mix. But yeah, my one-to-one client, I was in the office this week, and there's been some big, heavy stuff going on. But the CEO turned around to me and was like, thank God we've got HR back again and that you're here to help us. I just thought, yay!
Yeah, good. I'm really pleased. That's great. I know, because I do think in some ways going out into that sort of grown-up space there every so often, I mean, I think it feeds the ego a bit in a positive way. It shores up your comment. You mentioned how, it sort of tanked a bit when you were not being challenged enough, and it was all stuff that you knew you could do, and then you end up not even doing the stuff well that you can do. And so just being pulled up into that every so often, you're like, I'm on my game. And then you add more value back into your other business too, HR hub, because, confidence is high, you're learning new skills, it should feed itself, shouldn't it, really?
Exactly right. Because, again, it had been years and years since I dealt with some of these like issues because of the time that I spent in the accountancy firm, and it was so sort of up and down. But now I'm sort of so regularly helping people with these kind of, interpersonal issues that actually, you're right. Like, I'm much more confident to say to people, well, this is what you need to think about. This is where you need to start.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Katie. It's been great to meet you, and I'm sure your story is going to inspire people. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Adam. Thanks so much for inviting me. I've had a lovely, lovely time.
Good. Thanks. Me too. Great.